so much for joining us today. I'd now like to hand over to mediation expert David Liddell, who will be presenting the webinar.
Michelle, thank you very much, and welcome everybody to today's webinar, which is focusing on the important role that mediation is playing in an increasing number of small and medium-sized enterprises here in the UK. So as Michelle said, I'm David Liddell, and I'm the founder and the director here of the TCM Group, and I've been involved in the areas of mediation and dispute resolution for some 20 years or so. My background originally was in mediating in community disputes, often very intractable neighbourhood disputes, and mediation worked so well in those environments. It became a major part of our social and economic regeneration packages up in Leicester. I also worked in schools, helping young people come together at times of conflict, where they're experiencing violence or at risk of exclusion, and trying to forge dialogue and discussions in those kind of environments. I've also worked in prisons, in the criminal justice system, bringing victims and offenders together for a program called Restorative Justice, giving victims a voice in the justice process and allowing the offenders to understand the real impact of their offending behaviour on a real person. And that's taught me a lot about mediation and the effect of conflict on people's lives. And when I'm working with small businesses and helping them to discuss their conflicts and their disputes, the response that people describe to me is it's stressful. They don't want to get out of bed in the morning. It feels like it's destroyed their relationship, their confidence. It's having a significant impact on people. And it strikes me that it doesn't matter where or how we experience conflict, it always seems to have a destructive, divisive, and often pernicious effect on our lives and on how we relate to each other. Now, we know that small businesses are the beating heart of the UK economy. And it worries me enormously when I talk to small business owners and other people involved in dispute resolution within SMEs about how little is being done within those organisations to help people have constructive dialogues and reach a consensus and a level of understanding of each other by having conversations and talking to each other and listening to each other. And for many small businesses, as we'll see through today's webinar, have become reliant on formal processes, reliant on litigation or employment tribunals, reliant on a process of dispute resolution which happens at the end of a dispute rather than at the beginning of a dispute. And I think that there's a recognition within key players, and particularly within the UK government, that that isn't good for business. It's harmful to our economic prospects. And so this webinar today is going to focus on how small and medium-sized businesses are getting back to basics, forging environments where people can talk with each other, that they can listen to each other, and they can find constructive remedies to difficult and challenging problems by engaging in a dialogue with the help of a skilled third-party mediator. So today we'll look at conflict and disputes and the nature of conflict within small and medium-sized businesses. We'll explore mediation. How does mediation work? Why does it work? What is different about mediation perhaps than some of the more traditional approaches that organisations rely on? Why mediate? What are some of the benefits? I'm going to argue today very strongly that mediation doesn't just offer benefits in terms of dispute resolution, bringing the parties to some form of an outcome. I'm going to argue that it unlocks the potential for innovation, creativity, finding problems in systems and processes, enhancing customer experience, unlocking the potential for economic growth within your business. I think mediation and a mediated approach goes far beyond dispute resolution. Setting up a mediation program within a small business doesn't need to be onerous and time-consuming, and I'd like to share with you some ideas that I have, and certainly from schemes that we've set up for small and medium-sized businesses, how they've embedded mediation into the heart of their company and into the culture and fabric of their HR systems and processes. And finally today I'd like to share with you some tips and hints on how you can spot and prevent and resolve disputes within your organisation. I guess as a mediator, we're very concerned about empowering others to resolve their disputes. And hopefully by the end of this webinar, you'll have some insights to help you go back to your offices and bring people together to forge conversations and dialogue. So the government are listening. I was reading some data in advance of the webinar, trying to get a handle on the representation of small businesses at Employment Tribunal, and whilst Employment Tribunal levels have dropped, the data that I've been reading through ACAS and CIPD and others still suggests that there's a high representation of small and medium-sized businesses within the tribunal system, and that in actual fact those levels aren't dropping. Well, the government quite rightly are concerned about this, and what the government is saying as part of the Enterprise and Regulatory Reform Bill, and this is from the website and the link is here, we want to give businesses the tools to resolve disputes without the need for an employment tribunal. SMEs and micro businesses will benefit in particular from the lower costs involved in settling disputes. Now, I'm involved actively in working with the Ministry of Justice and BIS in developing mediation programs and developing the mediation agenda, and I've never seen the government as committed as this government is to making it easier for organisations to promote early resolution and encourage dialogue and conversations in businesses. So for those of you involved in dispute resolution within your SME, this presents a great opportunity. So why are SMEs overrepresented at Employment Tribunal, and what experience do we have of seeing disputes and conflicts within small and medium-sized businesses? Well, the real strength of the SME, whether it's a small family business, a micro business, or a medium-sized company, are the relationships that exist within those businesses. They're often close-knit relationships where people have worked in the organisation sometimes for many years. They're close-knit and positive, and in many respects are extremely productive and perform well. But the greatest strength often can be our greatest weakness. And what we find within small businesses is when those disputes occur and when conflict takes a hold, the close-knit relationships can become destroyed. The conflict can have a highly destructive impact on the relationship. Emotions begin to run high, and that is almost a sense of a friendship breaking down. And the outcome of that we see are higher levels of vitriol, anger, frustration, and that's expressed often within SMEs on increased levels of sickness, an increased level of grievances being taken within the organisation, a significant reduction in productivity, and often managers tell me that they're unable to cope with the high levels of emotion that are occurring. And as a result of that, and what we see is managers feel they lack the confidence and the competence to bring people together to have those conversations. So the conflict quite quickly escalates. The parties take sides, they form camps and coalitions. Managers aren't equipped to be able to resolve that. People are off sick. In fact, we've got any number of mediations we do within small businesses. Actually, again, the main problem we have mediating for small businesses is people being on sick leave at a time when we're trying to organise the mediation. This is a real issue for a great many organisations. So managers don't have the training and the skills to bring people together, to handle those difficult conversations. They don't feel equipped to. But then likewise within those businesses, there's a limited HR function. There may be an HR manager in slightly bigger organisations, or in smaller organisations it might fall to the office manager or one of the directors of the firm to take on the HR roles and responsibilities. It's limited, and it often forms part of any number of other roles within that organisation. So we're already creating a problem, or seeing a problem here in terms of confidence, capability and capacity to respond to those conflicts. So what we do, we then turn to our policies and procedures. And most SME policies and procedures have been written according to a set of templates from whichever organisation you've chosen to write your templates. Now, I've seen many of these templates, and those templates, unfortunately, provide a number of challenges in terms of dispute resolution. The first one is that they provide a one-size-fits-all approach. They may have been modified or tailored to meet the organisation's needs, but in many cases they're not. They've been copied from one organisation to another through the template, and most of those HR policies and processes lack the opportunity for people to resolve their disputes through mediation. The reason being is that as a small business owner, most small business owners want to mitigate the risk of the harm of a potential employment tribunal, so the policies are written to mitigate or reduce the harm of any future litigation, rather than written in such a way as they promote dialogue and encourage a discussion. So the actual policies and procedures that small businesses employ at times of conflict in themselves perpetuate the conflict. They cause people to take hardened positions, and they perpetuate a grievance culture rather than a resolution culture within those organisations. According to ACAS research and a number of papers that we've seen coming out through ACAS and FSB and other organisations, we then start to see an increasing reliance on formal processes to resolve the disputes and potentially litigation. Now, as a result of that particular challenge, we start to see the cost of conflict. So now we've seen the stress, we've seen management confidence falling, we've seen teams torn in two, we've seen a harmful emotional, psychological or behavioural impact on the individuals involved in the conflict, a reliance on policies and processes which are hardening positions, and now we're based on lawyers have become involved, and we're starting to look at mediation as the conflict as being resolved through some form of a litigation or adversarial process. That's costing that business significant amounts of money, and for many of the companies that we work with, it's at this point that we get a phone call to try and resolve the particular issues. And what we find when we're talking to small business owners is that they've not allocated the costs, the resources that are required to resolve the dispute early, or in actual fact, the thinking behind their dispute resolution approach is to resolve the dispute at the end of the conflict rather than at the beginning of the conflict. When I was talking to a small business owner who was experiencing these exact same problems recently, and I was asking them, well, what's your approach to conflict resolution at the early stage? And they used the term bang heads together. Now, I know it's a turn of phrase, bang heads together, but banging heads together doesn't resolve conflict. Bang heads together potentially inflames an already inflamed situation. If the only strategy of the small business at an early stage of dispute resolution is to bang their heads together, then maybe it's not a surprise that what we face at the end of the conflict are destructive, harmful disputes. I was mediating recently for a small family firm. Two brothers had inherited the firm from their father who sadly passed away. There was disputes that had been rumbling on for some time. The father had never given both of them the information that they needed to resolve, to manage the organisation. So they were required to work collaboratively, and nothing had been done to develop a collaborative approach between themselves. So quite quickly, there was suspicion entered into the relationship, a lack of communication between themselves, until one of the brothers basically just walked out of the organisation and said he didn't want to come back. An emergency meeting was then called with the various shareholders, including other members of families, and that brother and the family was then voted out of the organisation. That led to a significant relationship breakdown, not just in terms of the way that the business was being run and the impact it was having on their employees, but in terms of the relationship between the two families. And those families were now at loggerheads. They were at a state of crisis, unable to find a way through this. They knew that the only route to this was through law, but they didn't want to go to law because of the fact that it was a family business. They didn't know where to go. So they came to the TCM, and we agreed to mediate between these two families. And what the mediation became very quickly apparent to me is this wasn't just a dispute about business issues. This was a dispute that ran back right the way to these brothers' childhoods in many respects. But they'd never been given the space to talk and explore and discuss their relationship with their father, with each other, and the impact that was having on the business. And simply as a mediator, by creating a safe space for those conversations to happen, they started to understand more and more about how their father had run the business, the limitations that was having on how they ran the business, and how there was no systems in place for any collaborative decision-making, and that they had no clear roles. So through the conversation and the discussion, they agreed that they could no longer work together, but they agreed an amicable arrangement where they could sever the relationship. They agreed the financial arrangements through mediation, and critically, and this is what I think was so powerful in the mediation process, they protected the relationship between the two sides of the family, and that's what mediation delivered in that case. And I think for me, where those conversations happen in an early stage, it allows the parties to find a positive resolution. So the successful small business views conflict then not as a threat, but as an opportunity for dialogue and conversations to happen. Mediation itself offers new possibilities. It promotes understanding, it cements relationships, and it builds cohesion within the business. And mediation itself is a non-adversarial process of dispute resolution. The mediator, and this can be someone from within your business or someone from outside of the company, is an impartial third party, and their role is to help the parties to have a dialogue and a conversation in a safe way and reach an outcome which is mutually acceptable. The mediator doesn't tell people what to do, they don't propose solutions, we're not there to determine right or wrong or culpability. The mediator's role is to facilitate the dialogue and encourage the parties to have an open and honest exchange. Mediation, of course, is voluntary and it's confidential, but those two elements are absolutely key for the mediation process. It's voluntary because we believe that the best outcomes we can achieve at points of dispute are the ones that we forge ourselves. We're more committed to those, they're more sustainable. And evidence suggests that the outcomes that are achieved through mediation are more sustainable than those that have been achieved or imposed by a third party. And confidential because it's not possible to have an open and honest exchange if what I say could at some point be used at an employment tribunal or some form of a litigation. So mediation is voluntary and confidential. It creates a safe space. So if you're interested in using mediation or thinking about bringing a mediator into a particular set of circumstances, the first stage of mediation, and this is our FAIR mediation model, FAIR, you may have heard me talk about before at previous webinars, facilitate, appreciate, innovate, resolve. So that's the FAIR model, facilitate, appreciate, innovate, resolve. So the first step of the mediation process is to secure a commitment from the parties. As mediators, we always speak to the parties on the phone before the mediation commences to make sure they're clear on what mediation is, to answer any questions they might have, and to set out how the mediation process is going to work and what their role will be during the mediation. Once we've secured the commitment to mediate, we then bring the parties together in the mediation process. However, before that, before we bring them together, it's important for us to have time with them on a one-to-one basis. So on the morning of mediation, we meet the parties separately. The first meeting is a chance for us to listen, to give the parties a chance to vent, to discuss their concerns, their hopes, their fears, the emotions that have been going through the conflict. And once we've met both of the parties for about an hour or so, we then meet the parties a second time for about half an hour. And the second meeting is about preparing them to come together. What do you want to say to each other? How will you react in the joint meeting? Because when they come together, that's when the real magic of mediation happens. And that's the joint mediation meeting. And the mediator's role is to bring the parties together, to create a series of ground rules to help the parties to feel safe, to give them a chance to share their concerns with each other, to have a dialogue with one another, to listen to each other, to try and build some level of empathy, some recognition, to see the world through each other's eyes. The mediator's role is dynamic, it changes, it develops throughout the process. We're summarising, constantly looking for possibilities and opportunities for moving forward. And the mediator throughout the joint meeting is ensuring that the parties are able to feel safe and confident to express their needs and goals and beliefs and values to each other in an adult and positive way. And as the mediation concludes, we look for opportunities for evaluation, how the parties are going to embed what's being agreed, and how they will sustain the agreement through mediation. So mediation is a solution-focused process. It normally happens over the course of one day. Of course, it can be much shorter than that, and we train managers to mediate, and some of the mediation work that they do might be half an hour, bringing the parties together for a conversation. So I'll explore in a moment what you can do to bring this approach into your organisation. So how do managers benefit from mediation, and what are the benefits to your managers by using this approach? Well, I think the first one is it's a step up from banging heads together. It's about nipping issues in the bud and creating an opportunity for the parties to have an open and honest conversation with each other. It reduces the burden of conflict on the managers and on your teams. It reduces the stress, the injury to feelings, the amount of time that's having to be spent. It does require your managers to be skilled in spotting and identifying problems at an early stage, but in doing so, it can have a real benefit to them in terms of how they resolve the dispute. It will see an enhanced performance as a result of the mediation process. And what we often see as a result of mediation is the parties feel more confident to participate in group processes and within their team. Performance goes up, and critically here for managers who are mediating or benefiting from mediation, they start to understand some of the pinch points in their teams. They start to understand where some of the problems are within their teams that they can then go on and resolve. We start to see mediation transforming destructive behaviours to more constructive interactions. And if you think about the frustration, the vitriol, the dogmatic positions, sometimes violence or aggression that we see in conflict, that's then transformed into dialogue, openness, exchange of views, empathy, appreciation and recognition. And these are constructive interactions which are critical to the good running of any team or small business. What the manager also gains by offering a mediation approach to your employees is they're going to gain valuable intelligence and data about what's happening in the current state of play within a team, far more effective than applying a Lean Six Sigma approach to your processes. Is if you want to know what's not working in an organisation, bring the parties in dispute together and they'll tell you what's not working, but they'll also find through mediation solutions to those problems. They'll help to foster a high-performing culture within your organisation, and we're great fans of From Good to Great, Jim Collins' text here. Mediation can help to build a great organisation, foster a high-performing culture, and really enhance the customer experience within your business. So here are some hints and tips that I hope are useful for setting up a mediation scheme. And just to say at this point, if you are interested in embedding a mediation program within your organisation, then please do contact me after the webinar. I'll be very happy to continue the discussion with you and provide a bit more detail about how you can embed a mediation program within your business. But here are 6 of the key strands that SMEs tell me they find useful when they're setting up a mediation program. I think the first of those is to ensure that mediation isn't just being used as something of a bolt-on, it's a bit of an experiment. If you think about your employees who've got complaints or grievances against each other, they don't want to be experimented on the newfangled approach, this meditation thing. They want to know that it's been considered, that it's been given the same consideration as any other project within your business, that is a strategic imperative to embed in mediation. And to develop a dispute resolution strategy, it's not onerous, but it's actually saying, well, what do we want to achieve? How are we going to achieve it? What's the current state of play in our business? What's our exposure to costs related to litigation? How are we handling conflicts at the moment? What are the strengths and weaknesses of our HR policies and procedures? So there's a bit of scoping that can be done, and then from that identify some key performance indicators and measures that will help you to shape and structure your mediation program. Embedding mediation into relevant policies is absolutely key here. We all know that there can be an uplift of up to 25% at an employment tribunal if you fail to follow your own internal grievance procedure. But there's a real myth that abounds here, that procedural justice can only be applied through adversarial processes. I would never advise anybody not to have a grievance process within their organisation. But for me, a resolution or grievance resolution process which pays equal attention to mediation and dialogue building, as well as the core strands of formal ACAS grievance model, can work within any organisation. So writing mediation into your grievance resolution procedure, changing the name of your grievance procedure to grievance resolution procedure, really starting to put an emphasis in your business that we are committed to resolving these problems before they escalate and resolving them outside of the courtroom, sets in place a clear message to your employees that you're absolutely serious about resolving these issues. Training HR and leaders in mediation and conflict coaching skills doesn't take weeks and months to do. We can train HR and managers in core skills to help them to mediate disputes or to coach people when they're in conflict or to have difficult conversations in a day or a couple of days in some cases. And that can make a significant difference to the way that your organisation handles conflicts and disputes. Some small businesses want to have access to internal mediators. And again, we run courses that are to an accredited standard for people to act as an in-house mediator within your small business. That might be one person, it might be a half a dozen internal mediators who can be mobilised to help resolve difficulties quickly and constructively and in an effective way, and again prevent those problems from escalating. There's no one-size-fits-all approach to dispute resolution in the small business, it goes without saying. But I think by having an imaginative and creative approach and being clear that as an organisation your values, your vision, your purpose is about resolving these issues quickly and constructively, because we know that conflict is going to happen in any business. It's It's not if it happens, it's when it happens. So having a constructive approach to those conflicts is going to help you, again, avoid the costs associated with conflict resolution. Being clear about that for all of your employees will help you to really secure a strong commitment to mediation. So continuing to publicise and communicate the scheme across your business, and then continue to measure and evaluate the scheme and celebrate the scheme. You'll suddenly find that mediation, maybe you have to do less compromise agreements, you have less time off sick, teams of perform, people will feel this. They can see it happening with their own eyes. I think for those of you in an HR or leadership capacity, you can measure this and start to hang on, this is making a significant impact and improvement on the way that we do our business. We're beginning a better business to work with, to work for, and to do business with. We're working closely with putting customer first at the moment as an organisation, and I see mediation skills not just enhancing the internal relationship, but also the relationship with external customers, suppliers, on the supply chain. Mediation cuts across the entire business. It's not just a process of dispute resolution, it's a philosophy, it's a set of values, it's an approach. And if we can measure and evaluate that, we can start to demonstrate that this is having a significant impact. And in the words of the late, great Brian Clough, having grown up in Nottingham, made a significant impact on my life as a youngster. And what he said here is, Rome wasn't built in a day, but I wasn't on that particular job. Well, I think what that says to me is it takes time. You're driving a transformation from a traditionally adversarial process of dispute resolution to a process of dispute resolution which is going to be based on collaboration, dialogue, consensus building. This is not language we're used to in our businesses. This is, for me, it's common sense. For many small businesses, it's radical. Maybe it's not as radical as it first appears, of course. Talking to each other and listening to each other, we've been doing that for many thousands of years. Reliance on HR processes is something we've only relied on for the last 30 or 40 years. So maybe talking to each other isn't as radical as it sounds. And here are some of the benefits that our clients tell us that they achieve. This is one of the tools that I've designed. This is available and from TCM, and we're very happy to share this with you if you let us know. We'll send this out to you. But we've designed a conflict calculator to help you to measure the cost of conflict to your organisation and start to measure the benefits of mediation. And going back to the previous slide, these are some of the benefits that you will see in terms of how you handle conflicts and disputes. A reduction in legal costs, a reduction in absence, an increase in team resilience, increased engagement, increased cohesion. We're a small business here at TCM. We use this approach and we see the real impact it has on our business. We go out and we work with small businesses across the UK. We see the effect it's having on their businesses. But it's not just small businesses. We're working with clients as big as Marks and Spencer's, BT, major banks are now using this approach. It works. And it delivers real benefits. So developing a resolution in your culture and your business is just a fun activity, but it can be very visual for those of you who like to work on a visual basis. Take a green pen and a red pen and just pick up your grievance procedure. It might be on your desk just sat next to you, so just reach over and pick it up when you get a chance. And with the red pen, mark all of the parts of the process which are adversarial, judgmental, blaming, punitive, combative, resulting in win-lose outcomes, sanctions or blame. And with your green pen, mark all of the parts of your process which are about resolution, talking, empathy, collaboration, consensus. And if you've got more than a few lines of green pen on your policy, send that through to me and I'll put it up as a model of best practice. I think you'll be surprised just how much red ink there is on your policies and procedures. And those policies and procedures and that red ink is defining your business. And if your policy is covered in red ink, then it follows that your organisational culture will be using those same kind of languages. Now, we'll have to have red ink on a page. There's no way in an HR policy or process we can't have that red ink. But I would suggest that for the small businesses that we're working with, they aspire to an equal balance of the green and the red ink. And I think that's something to work towards within your policies to help you to develop a resolution culture and make a move away from the grievance culture that we know can have a stranglehold on the modern small business. So finally, some useful hints and tips, I hope, in terms of how to have difficult conversations and spot and prevent disputes within your business. Going back to the language, banging heads together, it's a turn of phrase that is used widely. I think I know what that means. It means sitting down, having a stern conversation with two people, telling them to wind their neck in, crack on with the job and stop being so petty, or something like that. I don't suspect it actually physically means banging heads together. It might do in some businesses, but I wouldn't care to say. But it's a pejorative, and it's not looking to have a resolution. So let's move away from banging heads together and move maybe towards nipping issues in the bud. So when you're having those conversations with people, give them a good listening to. Give the employee a really jolly good listening to. Really actively listen to what they're saying. Ask questions. Be curious. Sit back and just let them talk and maybe vent about some of their feelings, some of their concerns. Then from that, identify not just the positions that they've adopted, because our position in conflict is always the same. I'm right, they're wrong. But what's underneath the surface of that? What are their interests, their beliefs, their hopes, their fears, their aspirations? What do they need from each other? And when you start to ask those questions, the needs become often quite similar: to be respected, to rebuild trust in the relationship, to just get on and do a decent day's work, to have a nice relationship, maybe to get back to how things were before this all kicked off. And you might find simply by asking those questions, you see that there's a congruence or a complementarism between the needs that the parties have. And in some respects, by asking the questions, the greatest tool of the mediator is the questions that we ask. Is the parties start to see their own remedies and their own outcomes. That's the first tip. The second tip is to create safe spaces in your organisation where problems can be aired and discussions can be had. And when I'm talking at conferences and seminars, I always ask the same question: how many people have been trained or have had formal training in creating a safe space, forging ground rules and creating boundaries? And generally it runs at anywhere between 0 and 10% of the group have received formal training in that. And I say to those organisations, you know, I've got a 3.5-year-old boy, Daniel, and if he's naughty or does something wrong, we need to sit down and have a conversation about that and find out what's gone wrong, what's he learned from that, and what will he do differently tomorrow. And obviously, being a parent, I'm sure those parents among you will recognise that that's about learning. It's about driving behavioural change. Well, if conflict is an opportunity for behavioural change, there's very little forums that exist for us to have those kind of conversations, whether it's through coaching or mediation or through circle time. So creating a safe space for people to do something really, really important, and this is what happens in those safe spaces. People can draw on the benefit of hindsight. With the benefit of hindsight, I wouldn't have sent that email. I wouldn't have said what I said. I wouldn't have acted in that particular way. And from the benefit of hindsight, they can draw insights, which then drives changes tomorrow. If those conversations can't happen, we're missing a real opportunity for learning, understanding, recognition within our businesses. So creating a safe space and being confident enough to chair that space as a manager or HR leader and let people open up and vent. I know that's not easy. That's not an easy thing to do, because we're asking people to talk about their feelings, and this can become extremely unpredictable. But for those of you who are confident and feel capable to have those conversations, you will know that actually giving people a chance to talk about their feelings is the very best way of resolving our issues and our dilemmas. Remain impartial. Try not to get hooked in and sucked into the conflict and the dispute. Step back from it. Take a three-dimensional view of it, 360 degrees. Everybody will want you on their side. It'll be great to have you in my back pocket. So people will try and use various conscious or subconscious tricks or techniques to get you to take their side. Don't allow that to happen. By remaining objective and impartial will ensure that actually the parties, firstly, they respect and trust your role, and secondly, the emphasis will then be on them to help find a resolution. Your role will simply to be asking questions and bringing people together. If you take the people's sides, the other party will see that happening. They won't trust your role as a third party, and they will disengage from whatever the process is that you're using. So we want people to be engaged and obviously not disengaged. And think about how you reframe negative language and negative positions. So, you know, again, if you've worked with TCM before, you'll know some of our reframing techniques and how important reframing is in mediation. He'll never change, says one of the parties. So what I'm hearing you say is you need things to be done differently tomorrow. If things were different, what would those things be? So reframing allows a negative position of he'll never change, and we shift that from a negative position to a future focus. And in doing so, we take the heat out of the language, but we retain the meaning. But she never listens to me. So what I'm hearing you say is you need to feel heard. If she was hearing what you say, what would you like to say to her? How would she show you that she was listening? Again, by taking she never listens and reframing it as you need to be heard, it allows us to then move into a future focus, and our questioning can be more future focused to meet the need rather than the position. And again, when we're running training courses for managers and HR professionals, reframing skills are absolutely the heart of mediation best practice. And again, I'm really happy to share with you further experiences or examples of where reframing's worked. But in essence, it allows the parties to rethink their language, which in most conflict situations tends to be negative, and there are, again, strong reasons why that happens. And again, mediation is not a silver bullet. It's, talking to each other isn't just a one-off. We don't just have a dispute and then talk to each other and then skip through the meadow. As much as we would probably like that to be the case, it's not the case. I think there has to be a level of pragmatism. There's a recognition that it's the start of the journey, it's not the end of the journey. So the dialogue has to be continuous and ongoing. So using a non-adversarial and mediated approach when there are the inevitable blips and blockages and bumps in the road, and giving people the chance to come together even when they've been talking to each other, keep conversation going, keep talking, and allow yourself and your employees the space and the time to come together in a non-adversarial, non-confrontational way. Because at some point they will find an answer that'll stick. But it's going to be an ongoing process, and it can take time. But in doing so, it can deliver real results, as we've seen. So thank you very much for listening and participating, or listening certainly today. There is a chance to participate in so much as there are a chance for you to ask questions. And whilst we're not going to get the opportunity to take questions now, if you do have any questions, I'm able to answer those offline, and again we can circulate the answer to all of those questions. If you want to stay online and submit any questions, failing that, then do email me. My email address is at the bottom of this slide, david.liddle@the TCM Group. And for those of you who are on LinkedIn and or connected with me, you'll know I'm very active on LinkedIn. So if we're not connected and you want to send me a connection request, then please feel free to do so. It'd be great to carry on the conversation through LinkedIn. But for now, thank you very much for taking part in the webinar. I hope it's been useful, and certainly the drive towards dispute resolution within small businesses is opening up the way and paving the way for mediation to become much more widely used. And as a mediator, and having seen the real benefit of mediation, I celebrate that, and I hope that you will benefit in due course with all that mediation can offer your small business. So thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us today. We do hope you found it useful, and as David said, if you have any questions or feedback, please do get in touch. Our next webinar will be an introduction to mediation on Thursday the 25th of November. Bye-bye for now.